I woke up in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and something else. Something metallic that I would later learn was the scent of my own fear. The fluorescent lights above me hummed with a frequency that made my teeth ache, and when I tried to move my head, pain exploded behind my eyes like 1,000 tiny fireworks. A woman in scrubs stood at the foot of my bed, her dark face creased with concern, her hands clasped around a metal clipboard that she held like a shield. "Welcome back," she said softly. "Do you know where you are?" I tried to speak, but my throat was raw, my tongue thick and useless in my mouth. I managed a sound that was somewhere between a groan and a word, and the nurse, her name tag read Beverly, stepped closer and adjusted something on the IV pole beside me. Cool liquid flooded my veins, and the edges of the pain softened just enough for me to think. "You're at Memorial," Beverly said. "You were in an accident, a bad one. Do you remember anything?" Remember. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and expectant. I reached back into my mind, searching for something, anything, that would tell me who I was, where I had been, what had happened. But there was nothing. Just a vast, empty darkness that stretched in all directions, a void where my memories should have been. I shook my head, and even that small movement sent fresh waves of agony through my skull. Beverly's expression shifted from concern to something else, something that looked almost like pity, and she made a note on her clipboard before meeting my eyes again. "It's okay," she said, but her voice carried a tremor that suggested it was not okay at all. "The doctor will be in soon. Just rest." But I couldn't rest. How could I rest when I didn't know my own name? When the face staring back at me from the darkened television screen mounted on the wall was that of a stranger? When every attempt to remember anything before waking up in this sterile room ended in that same terrible emptiness? Before we get going, please leave a comment telling us which state or city you're watching from. And please don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more compelling stories. The doctor who came later that morning was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He introduced himself as Dr. Morrison, and he spoke to me in the careful, measured tones of someone delivering news that might shatter. "You have what we call retrograde amnesia," he explained, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "It's not uncommon with traumatic brain injuries. The accident you were in was severe. You suffered a significant concussion, and the impact has affected your ability to recall memories from before the incident." "What accident?" I managed to croak, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Morrison exchanged a glance with Beverly, who had remained in the room, hovering near the door as if ready to flee at any moment. There was something in that look, something unspoken that made my stomach clench with an anxiety I couldn't name. "You were found unconscious at the scene of a single-vehicle collision," Dr. Morrison said carefully. "Your car had gone off the road and struck a tree. There were no other vehicles involved, no witnesses. Do you remember anything about that night? Where you were going? Why you were driving?" I closed my eyes and tried again to reach back, to find something, any fragment that might explain what had happened. But the darkness remained, impenetrable and absolute. I shook my head. "What's my name?" I asked, and even as the words left my mouth, I felt a strange disconnection, as if I were asking about someone else entirely. "According to your driver's license, your name is Maya Winters," Dr. Morrison said. "You're 32 years old. You live at an address here in the city. We've been trying to reach your emergency contacts, but so far, we haven't been able to connect with anyone." Maya Winters. I tested the name silently, rolling it around in my mind, waiting for some spark of recognition. Nothing came. It was just a collection of sounds, meaningless syllables that belonged to someone I couldn't remember being. "How long will this last?" I asked. "When will my memory come back?" Dr. Morrison's expression grew more guarded. "That's difficult to say. In some cases, memories return gradually over time. In others, they may never fully return. The brain is remarkably complex, and trauma affects everyone differently. What's important now is that you rest, that you allow yourself to heal. We'll monitor your progress, and there are therapies that can help. Techniques to assist with memory recovery." Therapies. Techniques. The words sounded hollow, insufficient, against the enormity of what had been taken from me. I had lost not just memories, but my entire sense of self, the narrative thread that connected past to present, that told me who I was and how I had come to be in this moment. Without that thread, I was adrift, untethered, a ghost haunting a life I couldn't remember living. They kept me in the hospital for 3 more days, running tests, monitoring my vitals, asking me endless questions about things I couldn't remember. Physical therapists came to assess my mobility. I had bruises everywhere, deep purple and yellow blooms across my ribs, my arms, my legs. My left wrist was sprained, wrapped in an elastic bandage that itched constantly. But aside from the head injury, I had been lucky, they told me. The car had absorbed most of the impact. I should have been dead. That thought stayed with me, coiling in my chest like a snake. Should have been dead. Why did those words feel less like relief and more like a threat? On the 4th day, they discharged me. A social worker named Patricia, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, drove me to the address listed on my driver's license. The apartment building was in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy but well-maintained, with a small parking lot and a row of mailboxes near the entrance. Patricia helped me inside, up 2 flights of stairs to apartment 2C, and used the keys that had been recovered from my personal effects to unlock the door. "Will you be all right here alone?" Patricia asked, her concern evident in the way she lingered in the doorway, as if reluctant to leave me in this unfamiliar space. "I'll be fine," I lied, because what else could I say? That I was terrified? That entering this apartment felt like breaking into a stranger's home? That nothing about this place, from the beige walls to the generic furniture to the framed prints of abstract art, sparked even the faintest flicker of recognition? Patricia left me with her card and instructions to call if I needed anything, and then I was alone. Truly, completely alone in a life I didn't remember. I stood in the center of the living room and turned slowly in a circle, taking in the details, searching desperately for something that might trigger a memory. A worn couch the color of sand, a glass coffee table with a few magazines fanned across its surface, a bookshelf filled with titles I didn't recognize, a kitchen visible through an open archway, clean and sparse, with a single coffee mug sitting beside the sink. I walked through the apartment like an archaeologist exploring ancient ruins, cataloging artifacts of a civilization I had never known. The bedroom contained a neatly made bed with a navy blue comforter, a dresser with clothes folded in the drawers, a closet with hanging garments arranged by color. Everything was orderly, almost impersonal, as if whoever had lived here had been preparing to leave and wanted to make sure nothing was out of place. In the bathroom, I found toiletries lined up on the counter with military precision. Toothbrush, toothpaste, facial cleanser, moisturizer, all arranged in a row. I picked up the moisturizer and unscrewed the cap, brought it to my nose, and inhaled. The scent was familiar in the way that vanilla or lavender is familiar, generic and unremarkable, telling me nothing about the woman who had used it. I caught sight of myself in the mirror above the sink and stopped, staring at the face that was supposedly mine. Dark brown eyes that looked too wide, too frightened. Skin the color of rich mahogany, smooth except for the angry red scrape along my left cheekbone where I must have struck something in the accident. Hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, dark curls escaping around my face. I looked tired, haunted, like someone who had seen something terrible and was trying to forget. But I hadn't seen anything. That was the problem. I couldn't remember seeing anything at all. I turned away from the mirror and returned to the living room, sinking onto the couch and pulling my knees to my chest. The apartment was silent except for the ambient sounds of the building, muffled footsteps from above, the distant hum of traffic from the street below. I felt like I was underwater, everything around me distorted and far away, unreachable. That's when I noticed the desk tucked into the corner of the room, partially hidden behind the bookshelf. It was small, just large enough for a laptop and a few papers, and something about it drew my attention in a way nothing else in the apartment had. I stood and walked over, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor, and looked down at the items arranged on its surface. A laptop, closed and dark, a small stack of mail, mostly bills and advertisements, a notepad with a pen placed precisely parallel to its edge, and underneath the notepad, just barely visible, the corner of a photograph. My hand trembled as I lifted the notepad and pulled the photograph free. It showed two women, their arms around each other, smiling at the camera. One of them was me, or the woman I had been, her expression open and happy in a way that felt foreign to the person I was now. The other woman was unfamiliar, with lighter skin and long braids, her smile wide and genuine. They were standing in front of what looked like a restaurant, the kind of casual place with outdoor seating and string lights. I flipped the photo over, hoping for a date or a name, anything that might tell me who the other woman was. On the back, written in neat handwriting that must have been mine, were two words: Lunch with Jordan. Jordan. The name meant nothing to me, but I clutched the photograph like a lifeline, studying every detail, willing my brain to conjure up some memory of this moment, of this person who had clearly been important enough to photograph and save. But the darkness remained, impenetrable. I set the photo aside and opened the laptop. The screen flickered to life, and I was greeted with a password prompt. Of course, I tried a few obvious combinations, my supposed birthday, variations of my name, but nothing worked. After the fifth failed attempt, a message appeared warning that the device would lock if I tried again. I closed the laptop with a frustrated sigh and turned my attention to the stack of mail. Bills, mostly. Electric, water, internet. All addressed to Maya Winters at this address. I opened them one by one, scanning the contents for any clue about my life, but they revealed nothing beyond the mundane details of utility payments and account numbers. Near the bottom of the stack, I found something different. An envelope with no return address, my name written on the front in an unfamiliar hand. The postmark was dated 2 weeks before the accident. I tore it open, my pulse quickening for reasons I couldn't explain. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. I unfolded it with shaking hands and read the words typed in simple black font. You need to stop asking questions. This is your only warning. My breath caught in my throat. I read the message again, and then again, as if repetition might reveal some hidden meaning, some context that would make it make sense. Stop asking questions. Warning. The words felt ominous, heavy with implication, but without my memories, I couldn't understand what they meant or who might have sent them. Had I been asking questions? About what? About whom? And why would anyone feel the need to warn me to stop? I set the letter down on the desk, my hands still trembling, and looked around the apartment with new eyes. Suddenly, the orderliness felt less like organization and more like something else. Preparation. Caution. As if the person who had lived here, the person I had been, had known that something was wrong, that something was coming. The accident. The single vehicle collision with no witnesses. Had it really been an accident? Or had someone tried to kill me? The thought sent ice through my veins, but once it had formed, I couldn't shake it. I returned to the bedroom and began searching more carefully, looking now not for memories, but for answers. I went through the dresser drawers, checking underneath folded clothes for anything hidden. I searched the closet, feeling along the top shelf, checking pockets of jackets and coats. I looked under the bed, behind furniture, anywhere something might be concealed. In the back of the closet, pushed far into the corner behind a row of shoes, I found a box. It was small, made of plain cardboard, unremarkable except for the fact that it was hidden. I pulled it out and sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding as I lifted the lid. Inside were more photographs, dozens of them, arranged in rough chronological order. The first few showed me younger, with different people in different places. Family photos, I guessed, though I didn't recognize any of the faces. A woman who might have been my mother, her resemblance unmistakable in the shape of her eyes and the curve of her smile. A man beside her, tall and dignified, possibly my father. Others who could have been siblings, cousins, friends. But as I moved through the stack, the photos changed. They became less personal, more documentary. Pictures of buildings, of people I didn't know in situations I didn't understand. A man in a suit getting into a car, a woman entering an office building. A group of people gathered in what looked like a warehouse. Some of the photos had notes written on the back, dates and times and single words that seemed to be names or locations. The last photograph in the box was different from all the others. It showed a house, large and imposing, set back from the road behind a tall iron gate. The image was taken from a distance, as if the photographer had been hiding, watching. On the back, in my handwriting, were 3 words that made my blood run cold. Where they took her. Her. Who was her? And who were they? I sat on the bed surrounded by photographs of a life I couldn't remember, holding evidence of something I couldn't understand, and felt the weight of my lost memories pressing down on me like a physical force. Somewhere in the darkness of my forgotten past was the answer to what had happened, to why someone had warned me to stop asking questions, to who had been taken and where and by whom. But without my memories, I was blind, stumbling through the ruins of my own life with no map, no guide, no way to know who to trust or where to turn. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the desk with the photographs spread around me, studying each one, trying to piece together the story they told. By the time dawn light began to filter through the curtains, I had formed a theory, fragile and incomplete, but the only explanation that fit the evidence I had found. I had been investigating something, someone had been taken, and I had been trying to find her. My questions had made someone nervous enough to send a warning. And when I hadn't stopped, when I had kept digging, they had tried to silence me permanently. The accident had been meant to kill me. The fact that it hadn't, that I had survived but lost my memories, was either incredible luck or cruel irony. I was alive but helpless, unable to continue whatever work I had started, unable even to remember why it mattered. But I was alive, and that meant I could start again. I could find the answers, piece together what I had been doing, finish what I had started. Without my memories, I would have to be careful, methodical. I would have to learn who I had been by tracing the path I had already walked. And I would have to do it without anyone knowing that I was asking questions again. Because whoever had tried to kill me once would certainly try again if they knew I hadn't given up. Over the next few days, I began the work of reconstructing my life. I went through every piece of paper in the apartment, every receipt and document and scrap of writing. I found bank statements showing regular deposits from something called Winters Consulting, which I eventually determined was my own small business. Freelance work, from what I could gather, though the nature of that work remained unclear. I found a phone in one of the dresser drawers, but it was dead, and I couldn't find a charger that fit it. I made a note to buy one. I found business cards scattered through various drawers and pockets, names and numbers of people I had presumably known or worked with. I made a list of them all, intending to call each one and try to reconstruct my relationships, my network, the web of connections that made up a life, but it was the photographs that kept drawing me back, especially the last one, the house behind the iron gate. Where they took her. The words felt urgent, important, as if past me had been trying to present me a message, a breadcrumb trail to follow. I studied the photo until I had memorized every detail, the shape of the windows, the style of the architecture, the way the trees framed the structure. Somewhere in this city, that house existed, and if I could find it, maybe I could find the answers I needed. I spent hours online, using the apartment's internet to search for images that matched the house in the photograph. I scrolled through real estate listings, historical building registries, architectural databases. Nothing matched. The house was distinctive enough that I felt certain I would recognize it if I found it, but distinctive in a way that suggested wealth and privacy, the kind of property that wouldn't appear in public records. On the 6th day after leaving the hospital, I received a phone call. The number was local, but unfamiliar, and I hesitated before answering, unsure whether speaking to anyone was wise. But curiosity won out. Hello? Maya? The voice was female, warm and concerned. Oh my God, Maya, I've been so worried. I heard about the accident. Are you okay? I recognized the voice from the tone, if not the memory. Jordan. It had to be Jordan, the woman from the photograph. I'm okay, I said carefully. Just dealing with some side effects from the head injury. Side effects? What kind of side effects? Jordan's concern deepened, and I could hear genuine care in her voice. the kind that suggested a close friendship, a real connection. I made a decision. If I was going to find answers, I would need help. And Jordan, whoever she was, had clearly been important to me. Maybe she knew something that could help me piece together what I had been doing. "Can we meet?" I asked. "There's something I need to talk to you about. Something important." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown the next morning. I arrived early, choosing a table near the back where I could see the entrance, a habit that felt instinctive even though I couldn't remember where I had learned it. When Jordan walked in, I recognized her immediately from the photograph, though seeing her in person brought no accompanying memories, no rush of familiarity beyond what the image had already provided. She spotted me and hurried over, her face breaking into a relieved smile that faded quickly when she got close enough to see the scrape on my cheek, the shadows under my eyes, the way I held myself with a tension that suggested I might bolt at any moment. "Maya," she breathed, sliding into the chair across from me and reaching for my hands. "You look terrible. What happened? The news said you hit a tree, that it was a single-vehicle accident, but that doesn't make any sense. You're the best driver I know. You would never just lose control like that." I pulled my hands back gently, not wanting to seem rude but needing the distance to say what I had to say. Jordan's expression flickered with hurt, then confusion. "Jordan," I started, and even saying her name felt strange, like I was lying even though I knew it was the truth. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. The accident, it wasn't just a car crash. I have retrograde amnesia. I don't remember anything from before I woke up in the hospital. I don't remember my life, my work, anything. I don't remember you." Jordan went very still. The color drained from her face, and for a long moment she just stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Then she shook her head slowly. "You don't remember me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "But we've been friends since college. We've known each other for almost 15 years. I was your maid of honor at your wedding. I was there when you got divorced. I've been there for everything." Married, divorced, more pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. I shook my head, hating the pain I saw in Jordan's eyes, wishing I could give her the recognition she so clearly wanted and deserved. "I'm sorry," I said. "I wish I could remember. But right now I need your help. Before the accident I was investigating something. I have photographs, evidence of something that was happening, something bad. Someone sent me a warning, told me to stop asking questions. I think the accident wasn't an accident at all. I think someone tried to kill me." Jordan's shock transformed into something else, something that looked almost like fear. She glanced around the coffee shop, suddenly nervous, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. "Maya, you need to be careful what you say, who you talk to about this." "So you know," I said, relief flooding through me. "You know what I was working on." Jordan hesitated, conflict clear on her face. She gripped her coffee cup with both hands, knuckles white with tension. When she finally spoke, her words came slowly, carefully, as if each one was being weighed and measured. "About 2 months ago, you came to me with a story. You said you had taken on a new consulting job, something that seemed straightforward at first. Background research for a client who was considering a business investment. But as you dug deeper, you started finding inconsistencies, things that didn't add up. Money moving through shell companies, connections to people with questionable backgrounds. You said you thought you had stumbled onto something bigger, something criminal." I leaned forward, every nerve in my body attuned to Jordan's words. This was it. This was the thread I needed to pull. "What kind of criminal activity?" "You weren't sure at first," Jordan continued, "but you kept digging, and the more you found, the more worried you became. You said there were women involved, young women who had gone missing. Not officially missing, not reported to the police, but gone nonetheless. Disappeared from their lives without explanation. You thought they were being trafficked." The word hit me like a physical blow. Trafficking. The house in the photograph. Where they took her. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture that was as horrifying as it was clear. "Did I know one of them?" I asked. One of the women who disappeared? Jordan's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly. Your sister, Simone. The name should have meant something. Should have conjured feelings, memories, a lifetime of shared experiences. But it was just another empty word in a void of forgetting. And yet, even without the memories, I felt something shift inside me. A sister. I had a sister, and she was missing. Taken. That's what the photograph had meant. That's what I had been trying to find. Tell me everything, I said. Tell me everything you know about what I was doing, what I had found. I need to finish this. I need to find her. Jordan glanced around the coffee shop again, her nervousness increasing. Not here. This isn't safe. If someone tried to kill you once, they could be watching. Come to my place tonight. I'll tell you everything I know, show you the backup files you gave me for safekeeping. But Maya, you have to promise me something. What? Promise me that when you have the information, you'll go to the police. Let them handle this. These are dangerous people, and you already almost died trying to expose them. Please, don't try to play hero. I wanted to promise. I wanted to tell Jordan that I would do exactly as she said, that I would take whatever evidence I had gathered and hand it over to the authorities and let them deal with the dangerous people who had taken my sister and tried to kill me. But something stopped me. Some instinct, deep and primitive, whispered that it wasn't that simple, that going to the police might not be enough, that there were pieces of this puzzle I still didn't understand, complications that made the straightforward solution impossible. So instead, I simply nodded, letting Jordan interpret that as agreement, and we made plans to meet at her apartment that evening. I spent the afternoon back in my own apartment, looking at the photographs with new understanding. The people in the surveillance shots, were they the traffickers? The ones who had taken my sister? And the house behind the iron gate, was that where they were keeping the women? Or was it something else, some other piece of the operation I had been trying to uncover? The more I learned, the more questions multiplied. How had I gotten involved in this investigation? Had someone hired me specifically to look into the disappearances, or had I stumbled onto them by accident while working on something else? And why hadn't I gone to the police already with what I had found? That last question troubled me most. If I had evidence of human trafficking, evidence of kidnapping, why had I kept it to myself? Why had I continued investigating alone instead of turning it over to the authorities? There had to be a reason, something that had made me believe I couldn't trust the official channels, but without my memories, I couldn't guess what that reason might be. I arrived at Jordan's apartment just after 7. She lived in a nicer building than mine, in a part of the city where the streets were lined with trees and the restaurants had valet parking. She buzzed me up immediately, and when I reached her door, she pulled me inside quickly, checking the hallway before closing and locking the door behind us. You weren't followed, were you? She asked. I don't think so. I took a taxi and had them drop me off a block away, walked the rest of the distance. Jordan nodded approvingly. Good, you always were careful about these things. Her apartment was warm and inviting, filled with comfortable furniture and personal touches that suggested a life lived with intention and joy. Framed photographs covered one wall, a chronicle of friendships and travels and important moments. I recognized myself in many of them, always with Jordan, sometimes with others I didn't know. There was a whole life here, documented and displayed, that I had no access to. Jordan caught me looking at the photographs and smiled sadly. It's strange, isn't it, to see yourself in moments you can't remember? Strange doesn't begin to cover it, I admitted. She led me to her dining table where she had already laid out several manila folders and a laptop. I sat down, and Jordan took the seat beside me, opening the first folder. You gave me copies of everything you had found, just in case something happened to you, she said. At the time, I thought you were being paranoid. Now I realize you were being smart. The folder contained printouts of financial records, spreadsheets showing money transfers, corporate registries for various businesses and shell companies. The amounts involved were staggering, millions of dollars moving through complex webs of accounts and subsidiaries. Jordan walked me through what she understood of it, explaining how I had traced the money back to a single source, a legitimate business that appeared to be using its infrastructure and connections to facilitate something far darker. The second folder contained the surveillance photographs I had already seen, along with others I hadn't found in my apartment. More faces, more locations, more pieces of a puzzle that was growing more complex by the minute. Jordan pointed out the key players, the ones I had identified as being at the center of the operation. "This man," she said, tapping a photo of a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, "is the one you believed was running everything. His name is Theodore Bancroft. He owns a pharmaceutical distribution company, totally legitimate on the surface. But you found evidence that he was using his distribution network for something else, moving people instead of medicine." Theodore Bancroft. I studied his face, looking for some spark of recognition, some visceral reaction that might suggest I had encountered him before. Nothing came. He was just a stranger, like everyone else in these photographs. And my sister, Simone. How did she end up involved in this? Jordan's expression grew pained. Simone had been struggling. You didn't talk about it much, but I knew things were hard for her. She had gotten into some debt, made some bad choices. She was working as a cocktail waitress at this club downtown, trying to get back on her feet. That's where they found her, where they recruited her. Recruited her for what? That's the thing. We don't actually know for sure that she was taken against her will. You thought maybe they offered her something, money, work, a way out of her debt. She told you she had gotten a new job, something that would pay really well and allow her to travel. She was excited about it. And then she was gone. No one has heard from her in 3 months. 3 months. My sister had been missing for 3 months, and I had spent that time trying to find her, following leads, gathering evidence. And then someone had tried to permanently stop me from continuing that search. You said I gave you backup files. Are they on the laptop? Jordan nodded and opened the computer, navigating to a folder marked only with a date. Inside were dozens of documents, more financial records, more photographs, and several video files that I hadn't known existed. Jordan clicked on the first video, and the screen filled with shaky footage of what looked like a warehouse interior. The video had been shot from a hidden position, the camera angle suggesting it had been concealed on my person or in a bag. I watched as figures moved through the space, men in suits supervising as younger women, some who looked barely out of their teens, were herded into a room at the back of the building. The women looked frightened, confused, and none of them resisted. They moved like people who had been broken, who had already given up hope. "This was taken 2 weeks before your accident," Jordan said quietly. "You told me you had finally found proof, evidence you could take to the authorities. You were planning to make copies of everything and go to the FBI. But then you got that warning letter, and you said you needed to be more careful. You wanted to make sure you had everything, that there were no gaps they could exploit before you went public." I watched the rest of the video in silence, my stomach churning with a mixture of disgust and determination. The footage ended abruptly, as if I had been forced to leave quickly, and Jordan closed the laptop with a decisive click. "That's everything I have," she said. "Everything you gave me. Whatever else you found, whatever other evidence you gathered, it must be somewhere else. Maybe hidden in your apartment, or in a safe deposit box, or with someone else you trusted." "There's something else," Jordan said hesitantly. "Something I haven't told you yet because I wasn't sure whether I should. But I think you need to know." I waited, my entire body tense with anticipation. 3 days before your accident, you called me in the middle of the night. You were terrified, Maya. You said you had gone to meet someone, an informant who claimed to have information about where they were keeping the women. But it was a trap. Someone had tried to grab you, tried to force you into a car. You fought them off and got away, but they had seen your face. They knew who you were. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. The warning letter hadn't been enough. When I hadn't stopped investigating, when I had kept pushing, they had tried to take me. And when that failed, when I had escaped, they had resorted to a more permanent solution. The accident had been their second attempt. "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because I was scared," Jordan admitted. "Because I thought if you didn't remember, if you couldn't remember any of this, maybe you would just let it go. Maybe you would stay safe. But I can see that you're not going to do that, are you? Even without your memories, you're still the same person, still determined to finish what you started." She was right. Even though I couldn't remember my sister, couldn't remember loving her or making the decision to find her, I felt the weight of that responsibility. The woman I had been had started this investigation for a reason. She had put herself in danger because something mattered more than her own safety. And I owed it to her, to that version of myself I couldn't remember, to see it through. I need to get my memories back, I said. Not all of them, maybe, but enough to understand what I knew, what I had planned. There must be something I'm missing, some piece of the puzzle that would make sense of all this. Jordan bit her lip, considering. Then she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, stopping on a name. "There's someone you should see," she said. "A doctor I know, a neurologist who specializes in memory recovery. She works with trauma patients, people who have lost memories due to accidents or PTSD. She uses hypnotherapy sometimes, along with other techniques. It doesn't always work, but when it does, it can be really effective." Hypnotherapy. The idea felt both promising and unsettling. What would happen if my memories did come back? Would I be able to handle them? Would they include the trauma of nearly being kidnapped, the fear of being hunted, the grief of losing my sister? But I didn't have a choice. Without my memories, I was working blind, following a trail left by someone I had been but could no longer access. If I wanted to finish this, if I wanted to find my sister and bring down the people who had taken her, I needed to remember. "Set up an appointment," I told Jordan, "as soon as possible." Jordan made the call right there, speaking in low, urgent tones to whoever answered. When she hung up, she looked both relieved and worried. "She can see you tomorrow afternoon. Her name is Dr. Evelyn Hart, and she's very good at what she does. But Maya, you need to understand something. If your memories come back, they might not all be good memories. You were living through something traumatic when the accident happened. The things you remember might be painful, might be frightening. Are you sure you're ready for that?" I thought about the woman in the photographs, my sister Simone, whose face I couldn't remember, but whose absence I could feel like a missing limb. I thought about the other women in that video, the ones who had been taken and broken and herded like livestock. And I thought about the person I had been, brave enough or foolish enough or desperate enough to put herself in harm's way to try to save them. "I'm ready," I said. Dr. Evelyn Hart's office was in a medical building downtown, a sleek glass tower that housed various specialists and therapists. Her suite was on the 14th floor, and when I entered the waiting room, I found it empty except for a receptionist who smiled warmly and told me the doctor would be with me shortly. Dr. Hart emerged a few minutes later, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and an air of calm competence. She invited me into her office, a space that managed to feel both professional and comfortable, with soft lighting and gentle colors that were probably meant to put patients at ease. "Jordan told me a bit about your situation," Dr. Hart said as we settled into chairs facing each other. "Retrograde amnesia following a traumatic brain injury. You're looking to recover specific memories related to events immediately preceding the accident. Is that correct?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I was working on an investigation before the accident. I need to remember what I knew, what I had found. It's urgent." Dr. Hart studied me for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "I want to be very clear about what we're doing here and what the limitations are. Hypnotherapy can be an effective tool for accessing suppressed or forgotten memories, but it's not magic. Your brain has locked away these memories, possibly as a protective mechanism. Forcing them to surface too quickly can be destabilizing, even harmful. We need to proceed carefully." "I understand," I said, though I wasn't sure I fully did. "But I need to try." Dr. Hart nodded and began explaining the process. She would guide me into a relaxed state, a form of focused attention that would allow my subconscious mind to become more accessible. She would ask questions, prompt me with specific details, and see what surfaced. The session would be recorded so we could review it afterward, in case I went under too deeply to remember what was said. "Are you ready to begin?" she asked. I took a deep breath and nodded. Dr. Hart dimmed the lights and asked me to focus on a point on the ceiling, a small circular fixture that became my entire world as her voice washed over me, low and soothing. She told me to relax my muscles, starting with my toes and working up through my body. She counted backward from 10, each number pulling me deeper into a state of calm detachment. When she reached 1, I felt strange. Not asleep, but not fully awake either. I was aware of the room, of Dr. Hart's presence, but it all seemed distant, muted, as if I were observing from underwater. "Maya," Dr. Hart said softly, "I want you to think about the days before your accident. Don't force anything. Just let your mind wander back to that time. What do you see?" At first, nothing. Just the same darkness that had greeted every other attempt to remember. But then, slowly, images began to form, fragmented and unclear. But there, a street at night, rain falling, the interior of a car, my hands gripping the steering wheel. "I'm driving," I heard myself say, my voice sounding far away. "It's dark, late." "Where are you going?" Dr. Hart asked. "I don't know. No, wait. I'm following someone, a car ahead of me. I need to see where they're going." The memory grew sharper, more vivid. I could feel the tension in my body, the way my fingers ached from clutching the wheel too tightly. I was scared, but trying not to show it, even though there was no one in the car to hide it from. "Who are you following, Maya?" "I don't know his name, just that he works for them, for the operation. I saw him at the warehouse. He might lead me to where they're keeping the girls." The car ahead of me turned onto a smaller road, away from the main thoroughfare. I followed, keeping my distance, trying not to be obvious. The rain was getting heavier, making it hard to see, and I almost missed the next turn. "What happens next?" Dr. Hart's voice was gentle, guiding without pushing. "He's slowing down, pulling up to a gate. There's a house, big house behind a gate, security cameras. The house from the photograph. I was there, watching as the man I had been following entered the code on the keypad and the gate swung open. I tried to memorize the number, but the rain and the darkness made it impossible to see clearly. "I need to get closer," my voice said. "I need to see inside." But even as the thought formed, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. Another car coming up fast behind me. Too fast. They had spotted me. They knew I was there. "Maya, what's happening?" Dr. Hart's voice sounded concerned now. "They're coming. They know. I have to get out of here." I slammed my foot on the accelerator, the car lurching forward. But the road was narrow and winding, the rain making the pavement slick. The car behind me was gaining, getting closer. I took a curve too fast, felt the tires lose traction. And then there was nothing but spinning, the sickening lurch as the car left the road, the screech of metal, the explosive sound of impact. Pain. Darkness. I jerked awake, gasping, my heart racing. Dr. Hart was leaning forward, her hand on my arm, her face creased with concern. "It's okay," she said firmly. "You're safe. You're in my office. The memories can't hurt you now." But that wasn't true. The memories could hurt me, were hurting me right now. Because I remembered. I remembered the fear, the desperation, the certainty in those final moments that I was going to die. And I remembered something else, something that made everything worse. "It wasn't an accident," I said, my voice shaking. "They ran me off the road. They tried to kill me." Dr. Hart handed me a glass of water and gave me time to collect myself. When my breathing had returned to normal, when the panic had subsided enough for me to think clearly, she asked if I wanted to continue or if I needed to stop for the day. "Continue," I said without hesitation. "I need to know what else is there." We went deeper. Dr. Hart guided me back further to the days before that final night, and slowly, piece by piece, the memories returned. Not all of them, not my childhood or my marriage or the years of friendship with Jordan, but the investigation, the search for my sister, the evidence I had gathered. All of that came flooding back with a clarity that was almost painful. I remembered the night I had met the informant, the one Jordan had mentioned. He had claimed to work for the organization, said he wanted out and was willing to talk. We met in a parking garage, and I should have known it was a trap, should have seen the signs, but I had been so desperate for information, so close to finding where they were keeping the women, that I had ignored my instincts. They had grabbed me from behind, 2 men, strong and efficient. They had tried to force me into a van, and I had fought back with everything I had. scratched and bit and kicked until I managed to break free and run. I had escaped, but they had seen my face. After that, I had known my time was running out. I remembered going back to my apartment and backing up all my files, giving copies to Jordan, hiding others in places I hoped would be safe. I remembered the locked laptop, and suddenly, I knew the password. Not random numbers or a birthday, but something more meaningful. The date Simone had disappeared, the day everything changed. And I remembered making a decision, a terrible, dangerous decision that now, with some distance from the desperation that had driven it, seemed almost suicidal. I had decided to follow one of the key players myself, to find the location where they were keeping the women and gather enough evidence to bring the whole operation down. I had known it was risky, had known they were already looking for me, but I had done it anyway, because every day I waited was another day my sister remained missing. That decision had led me to that rainy night, to the house behind the gate, to the car chase that ended with me wrapped around a tree, my memories scattered like broken glass. When Dr. Hart brought me out of hypnosis, I felt exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. The memories were back, not all of them, but enough. Enough to know what I had been doing, what I needed to finish, enough to understand the danger I was in, and the stakes of what I was attempting. "How do you feel?" Dr. Hart asked, watching me carefully. "Overwhelmed," I admitted, but also strangely relieved. "It's like I've been stumbling around in the dark, and someone finally turned on the lights." Dr. Hart smiled. "That's a good way to describe it. But Maya, I need to emphasize something. These memories you've recovered, they're traumatic. You've been through a terrible ordeal, and your brain locked those memories away for a reason. Now that they're accessible again, you need to be prepared for the emotional impact. Post-traumatic stress, anxiety, nightmares. These are all possible, even likely." "I understand," I said, "but I don't have the luxury of processing trauma right now. I have work to finish." Dr. Hart's expression grew troubled. "Jordan told me a bit about what you've been investigating. Maya, if someone tried to kill you once, they'll try again. Whatever evidence you've gathered, whatever you think you need to do, please consider going to the police. Let them handle this." It was the same advice Jordan had given me, and I understood why. From the outside, it seemed like the obvious solution. I had evidence of criminal activity, of kidnapping and trafficking. The authorities should handle it. That's what they were there for. But I had remembered something else during the hypnosis session. Something that complicated everything. A conversation I'd had with a contact, someone in law enforcement who had been willing to talk off the record. They had told me that Theodore Bancroft, the man at the center of the operation, had connections. Politicians, judges, police officers, people who owed him favors or were on his payroll. Any attempt to go through official channels would likely be compromised before it even began. That's why I had been gathering evidence myself. Not just to prove what was happening, but to make the case so airtight, so public, that no amount of influence could make it disappear. I didn't explain all of this to Dr. Hart. Instead, I thanked her for her help, promised to take care of myself, and left with her card and instructions to call if I needed anything. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the cool evening air, feeling the weight of recovered memories settling over me like a familiar coat. I was no longer Maya Winters, the blank slate, the woman with no past. I was Maya Winters, the investigator, the sister, the woman who had chosen to put herself in danger because some things mattered more than safety. And I had work to do. I went back to my apartment and straight to the laptop. With the password I now remembered, it unlocked immediately, revealing desktop filled with folders and files organized with meticulous care. I opened the main folder and found everything. All of my research, compiled and cross-referenced and annotated. Financial records proving the flow of money through Bancroft's network. Testimonies from witnesses who had seen the women being moved. Surveillance footage from multiple locations. And most damning of all, a database I had managed to access that listed names, dates, and locations. Women who had been taken, where they had been moved, what had happened to them. I searched the database for Simone's name and found her. The entry was brief, but enough. Recruited from the nightclub where she worked, promised legitimate employment overseas, transported to a holding location before final placement. Status: active. Active. She was alive, or at least she had been alive when this database was last updated, 2 weeks before my accident. Relief and terror flooded through me in equal measure. Alive means there was still hope, but active means she was still being exploited, still trapped in whatever nightmare they had sold her into. The holding location listed in the database was an address I didn't recognize. I pulled up a map and entered the coordinates. It was in an industrial area on the outskirts of the city, a warehouse district that had seen better days. According to the satellite view, the specific building was large and nondescript, surrounded by a chain-link fence. I knew what I had to do. The same thing I had been trying to do when they ran me off the road. I had to get into that warehouse, had to gather the final piece of evidence I needed. Visual proof that women were being held there. Footage of them, alive and identifiable. Something that would make it impossible for anyone to deny what was happening. But this time, I would do it smarter. I wouldn't go alone. I wouldn't put myself in a position where I could be silenced before getting the evidence out into the world. I would have backup, a safety net, a way to ensure that even if something happened to me, the truth would still come out. I called Jordan and told her I had remembered, that I knew what I needed to do next. She tried to talk me out of it, begged me to just take what I had to the police or the FBI and let them handle it. But when she realized I wasn't going to back down, her tone changed. "Then I'm coming with you," she said firmly. "You're not doing this alone." "Jordan, it's too dangerous." "Which is exactly why you need someone watching your back. Besides, you need someone on the outside, someone who knows where you are and what you're doing, someone who can raise the alarm if things go wrong." She was right, and I knew it. I gave in, and we made a plan. Tomorrow night. Jordan would drive, wait outside while I went in. If I wasn't back in 30 minutes, she would call the police, the FBI, every news outlet she could think of. She would make sure someone came to investigate, even if it meant exposing everything prematurely. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk and went through every file one more time, memorizing details, making sure I understood the full scope of what I had uncovered. And I thought about my sister, about Simone, trying to imagine what she had gone through over the past 3 months, what she was going through right now. I still couldn't remember her face, couldn't remember our childhood together or the bond we had shared, but I could feel the absence where those memories should have been, a hollow space that ached with loss. And I knew, with a certainty that went beyond memory, that I would do whatever it took to bring her home. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. I prepared carefully, thinking through every detail of the plan. I would wear dark clothes, bring a small flashlight and my phone to document whatever I found. I would be quick, in and out, no heroics. Just get the evidence and get out. Jordan arrived at my apartment just after dark. She looked terrified but determined, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this woman who had been my friend for 15 years, who was willing to risk herself to help me even though I couldn't remember most of our shared history. "Are you sure about this?" she asked one more time. "I'm sure," I said. We drove to the industrial district in Jordan's car, an older sedan that wouldn't stand out. The area was mostly deserted at this hour, the businesses closed for the night, only a few security lights breaking the darkness. The warehouse I was targeting was at the far end of the district, isolated from the surrounding buildings. Jordan parked on a side street with a clear view of the warehouse entrance. From here, she could see if anyone came or went, could call for help if needed. I checked my phone one last time, made sure it was fully charged and the camera was working. 30 minutes, Jordan said. "If you're not back by then, I'm calling everyone." 30 minutes, I agreed. I got out of the car and moved quickly through the shadows toward the warehouse. The chain-link fence was old and poorly maintained, with several spots where the links had been cut or had rusted through. I found a gap wide enough to squeeze through and slipped inside the perimeter. The warehouse loomed above me, dark and silent. There were no visible cameras, no obvious security presence, but I moved carefully anyway, staying low, using the scattered debris and abandoned equipment as cover. I circled the building until I found what I was looking for, a service entrance with a door that looked less secure than the main loading bay. The door was locked, but the lock was old. I used a technique I didn't remember learning, but that my hands seemed to know automatically, applying pressure with a bent paperclip until I felt the mechanism give. The door swung open with a slight creak, and I froze, listening for any sound of alarm. Nothing came. I slipped inside and found myself in a hallway dimly lit by emergency exit signs. The air smelled stale, tinged with something chemical I couldn't identify. I moved forward slowly, my phone out and recording everything, just in case. The hallway opened into a larger space, what had probably been the main floor of the warehouse when it was operational. Now it was divided into sections by makeshift walls and curtains. I could hear sounds from deeper in the building. Voices, movement, someone crying softly. My heart hammered in my chest as I crept closer, staying in the shadows. Through a gap in one of the curtains, I could see into a section that had been set up like a dormitory. Bunk beds lined the walls, and on those beds were women. Young women, maybe a dozen of them, in various states of dress and alertness. Some were sleeping, others sat on their beds, staring at nothing. One was the source of the crying I had heard, her face buried in her hands. I raised my phone and started recording, making sure to capture clear images of the women and the conditions they were being held in. This was it. This was the evidence I needed. Visual proof that women were being held against their will, that everything I had been investigating was real. I was so focused on recording that I almost didn't hear the footsteps behind me. Almost. I spun around just in time to see the man stepping out of the shadows. A security guard I hadn't noticed, his face twisted with anger. He reached for me, and instinct took over. I ducked under his grab and ran, sprinting back toward the hallway I had come from. Behind me, I heard him shouting, calling for backup. More footsteps, more voices. They were coming for me. I burst through the service entrance and ran for the fence, my lungs burning, my legs pumping. I could hear them behind me, closer than I wanted, but I didn't look back. I squeezed through the gap in the fence, feeling the chain link tear at my clothes, and kept running. Jordan saw me coming. She started the car even before I reached it, and I threw myself into the passenger seat as she hit the gas. We peeled away from the curb, tires squealing, just as the security guards emerged from the warehouse. "Did they see the car?" I gasped, fighting to catch my breath. "I don't know," Jordan said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Maybe. Did you get it? Did you get what you needed?" I checked my phone. The video was still recording. I stopped it and reviewed the footage quickly. It was shaky but clear enough. You could see the women, see the conditions, see enough to prove what was happening. "I got it," I said. Jordan drove us back to her apartment, taking a circuitous route to make sure we weren't being followed. Once we were safely inside, she locked the door and made us both tea with shaking hands, while I transferred the video files to her laptop, to cloud storage, to every backup location I could think of. "What now?" Jordan asked. "Now we release it," I said. "All of it. Everything I've gathered. We send it to every news outlet, every journalist I can find contact information for. We flood them with documentation and proof. We make it so big, so public, that no one can make it disappear." "And what about your sister, Simone?" That was the question I had been dreading. Because I knew that the moment this went public, the moment Bancroft and his organization realized their operation had been exposed, they would move to destroy evidence. And the women they were holding, the evidence that could testify against them, might be moved or worse. I had to get Simone out before that happened, but I couldn't do it alone. I pulled out my phone and looked up the number for the FBI field office. Not the main line, but a direct number for a specific agent that I had found during my investigation. Someone my law enforcement contact had said was clean, untouchable, not on Bancroft's payroll. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. Agent Marcus Williams. "Agent Williams, my name is Maya Winters. I have evidence of a human trafficking operation running out of the city. Multiple victims, including my sister. I need to speak with you urgently." There was a pause. Then, in a voice that was carefully neutral, "What kind of evidence?" "Financial records, surveillance footage, witness testimony, and video I just recorded tonight of women being held in a warehouse against their will. Names, dates, locations, the whole network, everything you need to shut it down. Another pause, longer this time. Where are you right now, Ms. Winters? Somewhere safe, but I'm not coming in until I have guarantees. The people running this operation have connections in law enforcement. I need to know that bringing this to you won't just result in the evidence disappearing. I understand your concern, Agent Williams said, but you need to understand that if you have evidence of ongoing crimes, especially crimes involving kidnapping and trafficking, withholding that evidence makes you complicit. I need you to come in, now. Bring everything you have, and I promise you it will be handled properly. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that going through official channels would work, that the system would function the way it was supposed to. But I had spent months investigating this operation, had nearly died because of it, and I knew how deep the corruption ran. I'll come in, I said. But first, I'm releasing everything to the media. I'm making copies of all my evidence available to every news outlet I can reach. Once it's public, once it's out there where it can't be buried, then I'll bring you everything I have and make a formal statement. That's non-negotiable. Agent Williams sighed. Ms. Winters, I strongly advise against that course of action. If you release this information prematurely, you could compromise ongoing investigations, tip off suspects, and put potential victims at greater risk. Potential victims? Agent Williams, my sister is being held in a warehouse right now. Those women I saw tonight are actual victims, not potential ones. And every hour I wait is another hour they remain in danger. So here's what's going to happen. I'm releasing the evidence in exactly 2 hours. That gives you time to mobilize, to get teams in place to secure the locations I've identified. Once the evidence is public, the organization will know they're exposed. They'll try to move the women, destroy evidence. You need to be ready to intercept them when they do. Ms. Winters? 2 hours, I repeated. I'll send you a preview of what I'm releasing, enough for you to verify that it's legitimate and start coordinating a response. But whether you act on it or not, the information is going public. Those women deserve to be rescued, and the people responsible deserve to face justice. I've done my part. Now it's time for you to do yours. I hung up before he could argue further and immediately began drafting emails. I had a list of journalists I had compiled during my investigation, reporters who specialized in investigative pieces, who had track records of taking on powerful interests. I sent each of them a carefully worded message with encrypted links to the evidence files, giving them enough to understand the scope of the story, but holding back some details pending verification. Jordan watched me work, her face pale but her expression determined. Are you sure about this? Once you send those emails, there's no taking it back. You'll be making some very dangerous people very angry. They're already angry, I said. They already tried to kill me once. At least this way, if they come after me again, the world will know why. I finished the emails and hovered my cursor over the send button. 2 hours. In 2 hours, this would all be over. The investigation I had started, the search for my sister, the evidence I had gathered at such cost. It would all become public, and whatever happened next would be out of my hands. I clicked send. The emails went out in a burst, dozens of them, to news outlets across the country. Some would ignore them, dismiss them as conspiracy theories or attention-seeking. But others would see the evidence for what it was. They would investigate, verify, and then they would publish. And once the story was out, once the public knew what was happening, no amount of influence or corruption would be able to stop the momentum. I sent Agent Williams a separate email with enough details to coordinate a rescue operation, including the warehouse location and the timeline I was working with. Whether he acted on it or not was up to him, but at least I had given him the opportunity. Now what? Jordan asked. Now we wait, I said. And we hope that when the raid happens, when they finally move to rescue those women, my sister is among them. But I couldn't just sit still, couldn't just wait passively while others decided my sister's fate. I opened the map on my laptop and stared at the warehouse location, at the place where I had seen those women, where Simone might be right now. An idea formed, dangerous and probably stupid, but I couldn't shake it. What if I went back? Not to break in again, but to watch. To be there when the raid happened. to make sure that Simone got out safely. Don't even think about it, Jordan said, reading my expression. You've done your part. Let the FBI handle the rest. And if they don't? If Agent Williams decides to bury this instead of acting on it? If Bancroft gets tipped off and moves the women before anyone arrives? Then at least you'll be alive to try again. Maya, you almost died once already. These people tried to kill you. If you go back there, if they catch you, there won't be a second chance. I knew she was right. Logically, rationally, I knew that the smart thing to do was to stay safe, to let the professionals handle the dangerous work. But the memories I had recovered weren't just facts and evidence. They came with emotions, with the fierce protective instinct that had driven me to start this investigation in the first place. Simone was my sister. I couldn't remember her face, but I could feel the bond between us, the responsibility I carried for her safety. I have to go, I said quietly. I have to be there. I won't do anything stupid, I promise. I'll just watch from a distance. But I need to see this through. I need to know that she's okay. Jordan closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, her expression had shifted from fear to resignation. Then I'm coming with you, she said. No arguments. If you're going to do something reckless, at least let me be there to call an ambulance when it goes wrong. I wanted to argue, to tell her that she had done enough, that she didn't need to put herself at risk. But I also knew that having someone with me, someone I trusted, might be the difference between reckless and suicidal. I nodded my agreement. We spent the next 90 minutes preparing. I copied all of my evidence files onto multiple USB drives, giving one to Jordan and hiding others in different locations. If anything happened to us, if Bancroft somehow managed to silence us both, the evidence would still exist, would still eventually come to light. I checked the news sites obsessively, looking for any indication that the story was breaking, that journalists were picking up what I had sent them. Nothing yet. It was too soon. They would need time to verify, to reach out to sources, to build their own reporting around the evidence I had provided. But it was coming. I could feel it, the momentum building, the story taking on a life of its own. With 15 minutes left before the 2-hour deadline, Jordan and I left her apartment and drove back toward the warehouse district. We parked several blocks away this time, in a spot that gave us a view of the access roads but kept us out of sight. Jordan turned off the engine and we sat in the darkness, watching and waiting. Thank you, I said quietly, for everything, for believing me, for helping me. I know this isn't how you expected to spend your week. Jordan laughed, a short, brittle sound. When you called me after the accident, when you told me you didn't remember anything, I thought maybe it was a blessing in disguise. I thought maybe you could finally step away from this, live a normal life without the weight of what happened to Simone. But I should have known better. You were never someone who could walk away from a fight, especially not one that mattered this much. Tell me about her, I said. Tell me about my sister. What was she like? Jordan smiled, though her eyes were sad. Simone was bright, funny. She had this laugh that could fill a room. She was younger than you by 3 years, and you were always protective of her, maybe too protective. When she started having problems, when things got bad with the debt and the bad choices, you blamed yourself. Thought you should have seen it coming, should have done more to help. That's why you couldn't let it go when she disappeared. That's why you put everything on the line to find her. The 2-hour deadline passed. My phone remained silent. No calls from Agent Williams, no indication that law enforcement was mobilizing. I checked the news sites again and saw the first article starting to appear. A small outlet, one of the independent investigative journalism sites I had sent the evidence to. The headline was cautious but clear. Evidence emerges of human trafficking operation in metropolitan area. It was starting. Within minutes, other outlets began picking up the story. Larger ones, with more reach. Social media lit up with shares and reposts. The evidence I had gathered, the documentation of Bancroft's operation, was spreading faster than I had dared to hope. My phone rang. Agent Williams. "What the hell have you done?" he demanded, his earlier professional calm replaced with barely controlled fury. "Do you have any idea what you've just triggered?" "I've triggered justice," I said. Or at least, I've given you no choice but to pursue it. Those women are still in that warehouse. Bancroft's organization is going to realize any minute that they've been exposed, and when they do, they're going to try to move the evidence, which means you need to move first. You need to raid that location now, tonight, before it's too late. We're already mobilizing, Agent Williams said, and I heard the sounds of activity in the background, people moving, radios crackling. We have teams en route to multiple locations based on the information you provided. But Ms. Winters, I need you to listen very carefully. You need to stay away from those locations. If you're anywhere near them when we go in, you could compromise the operation or get hurt. Do you understand? I understand, I said, which wasn't exactly a lie. I understood what he was saying. I just wasn't going to follow his instructions. I hung up and looked at Jordan. They're coming. The FBI is moving to raid the warehouse. Then we should leave, Jordan said. We've done what we can. Let them handle the rest. But even as she said it, I saw the flashing lights in the distance. Multiple vehicles, moving fast toward the warehouse district. Not just FBI, but local police as well. A coordinated operation converging on the location where women were being held. And then I saw something else. A van pulling out of the warehouse, moving quickly toward one of the side exits. They were moving the women. Right now, while the raid was still minutes away, they were evacuating, trying to get ahead of the law enforcement response. They're running, I said, pointing at the van. Jordan, they're moving them right now. Jordan looked where I was pointing and swore. The van was heading away from the incoming raid vehicles, taking a route that would let it escape before the FBI could intercept. In that van were the women I had seen, the victims I had been trying to save, including possibly my sister. I made a decision. I grabbed my phone and called Agent Williams back. There's a white van leaving the warehouse, I said rapidly. They're evacuating the women, license plate. I squinted at the van, trying to make out the numbers in the dim light. I can't see it clearly, but it's heading east on Industrial Drive. You need to intercept that van before it gets away. How do you know this? Agent Williams demanded. Because I'm watching it happen. Just trust me. Send someone to intercept that van. I hung up again and looked at Jordan. Can you follow it? Without getting too close? Jordan hesitated for only a second before starting the car. Hold on. We peeled away from our parking spot and began following the van at a distance, trying to keep it in sight without being obvious. The van turned onto a main road, heading out of the industrial district toward the highway. Behind us, I could see more flashing lights. The FBI vehicles, redirecting based on my call, changing course to pursue the van. They were catching up, but slowly. The van had a head start, and whoever was driving knew they were running from something. The chase stretched on, the van weaving through sparse late-night traffic, the FBI vehicles gradually closing the distance. Jordan stayed back, keeping us out of the direct pursuit but maintaining visual contact. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. This was the moment that would determine whether my months of investigation, the accident, the recovered memories, all of it, had been worth it. The van tried to make a sudden turn onto an on-ramp for the highway, but it took the curve too fast. I watched in horror as it lost control, tires screeching, and slammed into the concrete barrier separating the ramp from the main road. The impact wasn't severe, not like what I had survived, but it was enough to stop the vehicle, to end the chase. FBI vehicles surrounded the van within seconds. Agents emerged with weapons drawn, shouting orders. The driver's door opened and someone was pulled out, forced to the ground. And then the back doors of the van were opened, and women began emerging, confused, frightened, but alive. I counted them as they were helped out of the van, guided to safety by FBI agents. 12 women, the same number I had seen in the warehouse. One by one, they were moved away from the van, given blankets, attended to by paramedics who had arrived on the scene. And then I saw her. Even though I couldn't remember her face, even though her features should have meant nothing to me, I knew. I knew with absolute certainty. The woman being helped out of the van last, younger than me, with my mother's eyes and a face that was both familiar and strange, was my sister. That's her, I whispered. That's Simone. Jordan squeezed my hand. Then it's over. You found her. You saved her. The FBI secured the scene, arrested the driver and a guard who had been in the van with the women, began the process of documenting evidence and taking statements. I watched from our vantage point down the road, watched as my sister was wrapped in a blanket and guided to an ambulance, and felt something break open inside me. Relief, grief, exhaustion, triumph, all of it hitting at once. My phone rang again. Agent Williams. Ms. Winters, I don't know how you keep managing to be in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, but you were right about the van. We've secured 12 victims and made 2 arrests. We've also raided the warehouse and Bancroft's other known locations. This is a significant operation, and thanks to the evidence you provided, we're going to be able to dismantle the entire network. My sister, I said. Simone Winters. Is she one of the women you recovered? I heard rustling, voices in the background as Agent Williams checked. Then, yes, Simone Winters is among the victims. She's being taken to the hospital for evaluation, but she appears to be physically unharmed. Do you want to meet her there? Yes, I said. I'm coming now. Jordan drove us to the hospital, neither of us speaking. There was too much to say and not enough words to say it. The enormity of what had happened, of what we had accomplished, was still sinking in. At the hospital, Agent Williams met us in the lobby. He was a middle-aged man with a tired face and eyes that had seen too much, but when he looked at me, there was something like respect in his expression. Ms. Winters, he said, before you see your sister, I need to warn you. She's been through trauma. She may not be ready to talk about what happened, and she may need time to process. Don't push her. I understand, I said. Can I see her? He led us to a private room where Simone was being examined. A nurse was taking her vitals, asking gentle questions. When we entered, Simone looked up, and our eyes met. For a moment, there was no recognition. She didn't know who I was, just as I didn't have memories of who she was to me. We were strangers, connected by blood, and by the months of searching that had brought me to this moment. But then something shifted in her expression. Maybe it was something in my face, some resemblance she recognized. Maybe it was just instinct. She stood up from the examination table, took a hesitant step forward. Maya? She said uncertainly. Simone, I replied, and I couldn't stop the tears that came then. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't find you sooner. She crossed the distance between us and wrapped her arms around me, and I held her tight. This sister I couldn't remember but had never stopped searching for. She was shaking, crying, and so was I. 2 women who had been lost and were now, somehow, found. They said someone was looking for me, Simone whispered against my shoulder. They said someone wouldn't give up, but I never thought it would really happen. I thought I was going to disappear forever. You didn't disappear, I said. I wouldn't let you. We stayed like that for a long time, 2 sisters reunited in the aftermath of trauma, holding each other in a hospital room, while FBI agents and nurses moved around us. Jordan stood near the door giving us space but staying close, and I was grateful for her presence, for the friend who had helped make this moment possible. Eventually, Agent Williams approached and gently told us that Simone would need to give a statement, that there was still work to be done in building the case against Bancroft and his organization. But for now, for this moment, that could wait. For now, it was enough that we were together. Over the next few weeks, the story exploded. The evidence I had gathered became the foundation for one of the largest human trafficking prosecutions in the region's history. Theodore Bancroft and dozens of others connected to his operation were arrested. The women who had been trafficked were provided with support services, legal assistance, and protection. Simone slowly began to recover, to rebuild her life, and though the scars of what she had endured would never fully disappear, she had survived. My memories continued to return in pieces, not all of them, not a complete picture of who I had been before the accident, but enough. Enough to remember my sister's laugh, the way Jordan and I had become friends, the small moments that made up a life. The trauma memories came too, nightmares about the chase, the impact, the fear. But Dr. Hart helped me process them, helped me understand that surviving trauma meant carrying the scars, but not being defined by them. Jordan never let me forget that she had been right to worry, that I had nearly gotten myself killed. But she also never let me forget that the risks had been worth it, that the women we had helped rescue, that Simone, were alive because I hadn't given up. On the 1-year anniversary of the accident, I drove out to the location where my car had hit the tree. The road had been repaired, the damaged tree removed, and there was nothing to mark what had happened there. But I stood on the shoulder and looked at the spot where I had almost died, where my memories had been scattered, and I felt something like gratitude. Because that accident, as terrible as it had been, had given me something. It had given me the distance to see my life clearly, to understand what mattered and what didn't. It had forced me to reconstruct myself not from memory, but from evidence, to choose who I wanted to be based on the actions of who I had been. And the woman I had been, the woman who had been willing to risk everything to save her sister, was someone worth remembering, someone worth being. I got back in my car and drove home, to the apartment I still lived in, to the life I had rebuilt. Simone was coming over for dinner, along with Jordan. We had made it a tradition, these weekly dinners, where we would talk and laugh and slowly stitch our lives back together. The past would always be there, some parts remembered and some forever lost. But the future was wide open, full of possibilities, and I was ready to meet it with clear eyes and a grateful heart. The woman in the mirror was no longer a stranger. She was Maya Winters, survivor, sister, friend, and her story was just beginning. So please tell me what you thought of the story in the comments below. And if you liked this tale, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me to keep creating these wonderful stories. Until tomorrow, all my love.